For example, my father, who comes like from a super Indian-dominated culture, always told me, hey, Aniket, stay at a job, 30 years, work hard, never ask for a raise, never dare to raise your voice. Sounds a bit harsh, but you know what I mean, against your manager, never demand anything. Be appreciative about a job you have. And I took actually that mindset because you think your father, your mother, whatever they say, like that must be right?
What happens when your parents' well-meaning advice isn't so right? We're going to jump into that in a moment. However, first things first. Hey there, risers and thrivers, and welcome back to season 3 of On the Up and Up, the podcast amplifying the untold stories and achievements of the underrepresented and underestimated. I'm your host, Janine, and before we jump into our guest for this episode, I just need to take a moment to absorb how fast time moves, like not only on a personal level, but also related to this podcast, because y'all, this is episode 19. Yeah, and in a couple of weeks, this podcast is going to be 1 year old. So I'm definitely going to need to unpack that at some point this month. But for those of you that consistently listen and support the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. What would you like to see in the next year of On the Up and Up? Also, we can throw it back and you can ask any of your questions about what the last year of podcasting has been like. For example, what mistakes I've made podcasting, what learnings I've gotten from my guests. You think it, you can ask it. So feel free to DM your questions via any of our social media channels. Now, without further ado, joining me on this episode is a powerhouse that goes by the name of Aniket Kumar. He is a founder, HR leader, and mentor whose career started off rather young, whereby he started his first company at 16, and after a few years of rotating through different job functions at companies like HelloFresh, Lime, and Gorillas, he became the director of global HR and organizations at LunarX. Mind you, he's currently 23 years old. And as a child of refugees, Aniket saw entrepreneurship as the way to go to build a sustainable future, not only for himself, but also his family. His path is an unconventional one, but one that we can also learn a lot from. So, enough from me. Aniket, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And would you like to tell the listeners more about yourself?
Yes, thank you so much for having me here. Really a pleasure. As said, really unused to be on the other side of being interviewed and not the interviewing person. But yeah, I'm Aniket, 23 years old, born and raised in Germany, near Düsseldorf, in my lovely hometown Essen. And actually grew up, as you said, a little bit with my parents migrating from Afghanistan back in 1986. That's how all like this roots and mixed up background came from, and then somehow found my path to startups and other amazing things.
It's always interesting to think of being a culmination of so many different cultures. Like I know for myself, being Ghanaian, German, growing up in the US, like typical third culture kid, you also very much have a similar experience. And I always am curious what it's like for other people who've experienced something similar, your journey to becoming who you are today and your own, especially when it comes to the topic of identity. So how was that for you growing up in Germany?
Actually, it's pretty funny because I learned German pretty late. So the area I grew up in my hometown was super dominated by immigrants. So means until the age of 4 or I think it was 4, I was better in speaking Turkish than German, actually.
Oh, wow.
Because my parents couldn't raise me in German because they are not so good in German. And my brother was mainly in school, so I didn't have that many German touch points. And we had a 5-story, like, 5 flats in the house, and 4 of them were Turkish, and we were the only Afghans. I really thought when I was younger that this is like a weakness and it's so bad. I always tried to be as German as I could once I learned German. Or when I was with my Afghan friends, I tried to be as Afghan as I could and try to be super extreme in these things. And now I think after, I would say, 23 years, so not so long, I realized this is actually a superpower. So it becomes like a weakness turns into a superpower and allows you to connect with different type of people, but also gives you a sense of empathy. I think that's something which I sometimes see being super appreciated by people who have similar backgrounds. So I think that's something which I really enjoy. I don't know how it was for you, because you had it a little bit more diverse than I have it, actually.
Oh, I don't know. For me, growing up, I feel like I grew up very much with the American identity, right? I grew up with a single mom and she was busy. So she didn't have, it's not that she was busy and didn't have time for me, but she was working multiple jobs, trying to make ends meet. So I was always with other people of different cultures. I remember I had a babysitter from Guatemala, or I'd have another Ghanaian babysitter. But the thing about it was my mom only ever spoke to me in English. And so I didn't have that hurdle of learning a language because I just kept on speaking English. The problem was, I think, for me, where I ended up feeling disconnected from my cultures because I didn't grow up with them. So didn't feel very German. I definitely didn't grow up with my father, so didn't have that until I moved here at 18. The Ghanaian culture, I had an inkling of it through my mom, through the food, through certain aspects of the culture, but that was missing somehow too because I couldn't speak the language. We didn't have a Ghanaian community where we were. So for me, I was always like, I felt very American, but also not at the same time. So I was always feeling out of place. And that's why I brought the question up with you, because for me, it felt like I couldn't be enough of any of them because I just was, I couldn't even compensate to fit in because I just wasn't a part of it. So I just ended up as like this awkward misfit in between where I was just like, ugh. And I did feel like it was a weakness for a long time. And I used to really admire people who were just like born and raised in one nationality, know their culture, know their language really well. And I would be like, wow, how cool is that? You know who you are. Now I see it differently, but back then.
And one thing you mentioned actually, and maybe also a thing which people underestimate, is food. I appreciate it so much because I somehow also have an Indian touch. The food my mother cooks or my father cooks is insanely mixed up with also them being now in Germany since '86. In the end, definitely visit a friend who has these mixed up cultures and let yourself being invited for dinner. It's you won't regret it.
Dinner. It's gonna be a real good dinner. Exactly. You said that you've realized it's been a benefit to you, right? And I can say the same for myself. I'm like, it's a superpower. You're a chameleon. You can fit in everywhere, but you also have empathy for a lot of people, and also empathy for different circumstances, and even probably able to look beyond whatever you're seeing at face value. So I know you did say that you grew up as a child of refugees as well. How do you think that shaped your experiences, especially your approach to work and to life in general?
Actually, that's super interesting because I reflected about that over the last year a lot, because I tried to understand a little bit more like the way how I took certain decisions in my life and how can I make sure that I learn out of them, because I think some of them were right, some were wrong, and I try to never regret. I try to take learnings out of them and make sure that the next the next years which are ahead of me, are probably supported by the right decisions. So then I actually thought about what influence does like my family and this background have, and I realized that the attachment to advice. I love my parents, super hardworking people. Like they came here with, my mother still says it, like $14, and they had nothing else than that, and somehow hustled their way through and raised three children. I'm at least two of them I'm proud of. Myself, maybe we'll come to that later. No, I love my brothers. But looking at that, I think, for example, my father, who comes like from a super Indian dominated culture, always told me, hey Aniket, stay at a job 30 years, work hard, never ask for a raise, never dare to raise your voice, sounds a bit harsh, but you know what I mean, against your manager, never demand anything, be appreciative about a job you have. And I took actually that mindset, because you think your father, your mother, whatever they say, like that must be right? Because you have no other attachment to any other business person. Also, them being self-employed means, I thought what they do is entrepreneurship. But being self-employed and being an entrepreneur, this is like two different pairs of shoes. That somehow gave me sometimes like the idea of being on the right path, while realizing that this is a different path than like the destination I want to go to. So I sometimes really had to rethink the advice I got from them and distill like the quintessence out of it, because like why my father told me this was he wanted me to play it safe. So if we didn't intend to do anything wrong with me, of course not. And that somehow came pretty late, actually, like just a year or two ago, I realized that, because my parents always thought, okay, this guy is like throwing away a safe job, like an unlimited contract, indefinite contract, okay salary, so why are you going to this company no one knows about? Or why are you quitting and building your own company? Like, are you crazy? You have everything you want. Like, why do you want more? And that's something where I realized that this background sometimes brings you into situations where you really have to be thinking about stay attached to your roots, which I am insanely. I see my family every second week, and I travel there. But on the other hand, also try to connect with people who can somehow cover up the deficits of your parents due to their circumstances. Don't get it wrong, but it's in the end, like finding right mentors, finding the right friends, and really building a surrounding which is like a ground where you can grow on, instead of a ground which pulls you into different areas and elevate more spread, and that's something which I learned based on that, let's say in the last 2 years, a lot.
I can so relate to that in a lot of ways, and I think I'm probably still going through that journey of trying to figure out how to accommodate the advice of my mother and others like her, while also keeping an eye on what I think is best for me. And it's a hard thing because I think it was only fairly recently where I had to reflect on it, and I was like, okay, where's her advice coming from? And I think much like your parents, the advice is coming from a place that's seeking security and safety. And we already have that as a fundamental basis through the privilege of growing up here, right? And the environments that we're in. Because I even know for my dad, he was always like, work at Deutsche Bank and become Frau Director of whatever department. And I was like, probably not. But thank you.
I'm glad you didn't.
I'm glad I didn't either, although I'm like, maybe I could have been director by now. Who knows? No, jokes. That would have taken forever. But I get where you're coming from, and it's hard to filter through that when you're young, because you're already going through all of the transitions, and then you're seeing other people who are pursuing the paths that your parents may have wanted you to pursue. So I love that you bring up the part of mentorship, because I think for myself also, it's the advice and the perspective that I've gotten from other people who are just from a completely different world than what I grew up in that helped me to see, oh, there's a different way that these things could be done. And I think that also brings me to the question, because I remember in the conversation that we had prior to this, you were saying, like, your parents were like, what do you mean, like, quitting your job? Or you even we take it from the beginning, you dropped out of university, you know?
Not a good chapter.
Yeah, but it's a path that you chose to take, and it was going against the grain. So how was that experience for you when you were on that path, especially dealing with probably thinking to yourself, am I making the right choice? How was that?
One disclaimer, it now sounds so much more fancy than it was. So when I came to Berlin, I actually just graduated. 2 days later, I jumped into the first plane back then to Tegel. So quickly came over to Berlin and had my shared flat and started my job. And my bank account was already minus 400. And I was allowed an overdraft of 500. So that's like so it was really not the right way to do it. And the reason why I also came here, I told my parents, it's just studying and I will be a working student and let you know. And one day I realized during university that this is probably not giving me that much as like I'm learning at work right now. And that then gave me the opportunity to think about the way, like how, I don't know, you structure a meeting, how you behave in a professional manner. Of course, I knew that somehow, but in the end, those were things because I, like the background of my parents, as said, like super self-employed, like hustling, never knew, for example, what are office politics, how to behave in these. And I somehow realized, okay, the growth rate sounds like too much financy, but the growth I can see here as a trajectory in employment is so much higher than at university, and I had the feeling that the cost of opportunity is too high. So what I in the end did, my parents already know it, so it's not leaking anything, but I lied to them and I just said, hey, I'm still in university. Every time I went into my hometown, my father was like, hey, how is it going? I just see you working and on those video calls, but like never with a book. And I was like, no, I'm making it. It's going good. Until the day my mother sends me like to our family chat, like a picture of you are out of university because you didn't pay your fees. And oh no. And on that day I had a rough conversation, took then probably the next train to Essen, to my hometown, and explained them, look, like what I'm building right now might not make sense for you, but trust me, in 5 years it will. No, I think I said 10 years. And the thing which happened out of that was literally my father always, every call I had with him, when are you starting your serious career? Like, when are you doing something serious? And he was always making those jokes. Like I have a good relationship. I love the relationship with my father. We do a lot of humor. And he always said, hey, when are you you stop those frauds? When are you starting like the real jobs and stuff? And I was like, what's the real job? Like, go. It's similar like you, like go and go to Deutsche Bank or banking, or why don't you look at your friend? I heard he's now an architect and his brother is a doctor and his brother is a lawyer. And what are you doing? Look at yourself. And that was the typical things I was confronted with. But the reason I in the end took the decision to do it, and I actually also now, of course, don't regret it. I regretted it a lot while doing it. Was in the end actually the cost of opportunity, and I was under pressure to deliver. I think the biggest reason to do it actually was the pressure to deliver, because
to your parents or to who did you need to deliver
to both. For example, I stopped taking money from my parents at the age of 14. So every money I got, like my parents got money from the government because my mother was sick, she couldn't work. So in the end, I did side jobs to throw in some money to the family bucket and support that. And I realized if I now go to uni and, I don't know, eat canned soups every day and try to cut every living cost down to the minimum and do a working student job and, I don't know, be a waiter on the weekend, this is still not going to bring me in a situation where I can provide anything to my family. And knowing that my brother is getting older, like I have a younger brother, I knew I need to build something substantial within the next 4 years. Yeah. I told my parents 10 years so that they don't worry about me. But that's like when I realized, okay, pause the university button, do it in 10, 20 years, whatever. Yeah. And I will definitely do a bachelor's one day, just for the bucket list. Hopefully, I will definitely do it. Yeah. But I just knew it's too expensive. And I know university and education system, I'm hyper appreciative to the German education system, even though it needs a lot of improvement, but still you can still study with, I don't know, 390 euros or twice a year per semester. That's nice, but the cost of opportunity for me was too high. I cannot pay my family. I literally had an Excel which calculated down like how expensive it would be for me to study, because I would not earn money. And if you, I don't know, say a salary of, I think back then, I don't know, I was making 35k or so, that's another 35k you're not making. So on top of the studying and rent and stuff, and Berlin, and back then was a bit cheaper, but still not so cheap. So that's how I think it was the pressure to deliver which forced me to take this.
That sounds like a lot of pressure, because also you did mention that you stopped going to university, but then you were also doing 3 white-collar jobs at the same time.
Yeah, actually, I hope I can now say this. Now, I thought actually I'm young, and I have energy. And back then I did it as well. Like I'd never needed a lot of sleep. I know
must be nice.
It's back then. Like now I need a lot of sleep. I have those health trackers, everything, and they say sleep. I think, as I said, I'm a do not try this at home thing. Please don't try this at home. But in the end, I knew if I want to 3x on income, not to afford like a fancy car, like to build something for my family, be 3x on learnings and 3x on repetition, I have to 3x my work at least. And plot twist, it was more of a 9x you have to put in to get a 3x out of. So it was not like that connected to the numbers. And that was then for me the decision to actually do that. I did a lot of freelancing next to the side. Started off with, I coming back to the things like the connection to your parents. I never knew what freelancing means. The first freelancing gig I had, I'm not lying, I took 15 euros per hour, which is a joke. Oh, wow. You get now 14 at Aldi. Exactly. So I took 15 plus having to pay all the side costs. So probably I made 10 euros out of this. And I worked, and I didn't realize, I was super happy. I was like, oh man, they booked me for another full day. I'm so cool. And then I realized, why are they booking me? Because I'm cheaper than their intern. So those are things no one tells you. I didn't have any person at this time. I came to Berlin while knowing no one. So that was somehow the way I somehow fought through it. And then also looking at companies which I had the feeling these are environments where I have such a high pressure that I am forced to learn. And one wise person I really respect a lot, I can also, it's Khan from Gorillas. He's like the founder of Gorillas, who I admire a lot. He said, in life you just grow if you do things which are bigger than yourself. And that's one thing he said in every all hands meeting. We have to do stuff which is bigger than ourselves. And that's something I think which is like a line which goes through my whole life. Maybe also now what I'm doing. So in the end, I always feel I'm doing stuff which is not okay for a 23-year-old.
Hey, it's me popping in quickly to ask, what do you think of the episode so far? Feel free to share your thoughts by leaving a comment or review. Also, it would mean the world to me if you would follow, like, and subscribe to On the Up and Up. This simple act helps us to grow. Thank you in advance, and back to the episode. So, how are you getting this information? Like, what were your sources for learning these things? Were you just learning the hard way and then later on finding out, I could probably do
Actually,
better, or
it's there's a fancy answer and a real answer, and I will take the real one. It's pain. Actually, I remember signing deals where I realized 10 minutes after the interview, like I had one situation where I signed to join in a founding team, and like the founder said, "Hey man, we can't do anything on your salary, and you already have so much equity." And spoiler, it's not like 100% now, because on the podcast it probably might sound like I got so much equity. It was in the single digit and like low single digit. And man, we can't do it, and you are the top earner. And I somehow got a bad feeling. I was like, hey, you're a good guy, and I don't want to be like the top earner, so let's say yes. And I didn't know back in this time that any other job I would have taken would have given me 2x of the offer I got. And it's all not always optimized on money. Yeah, it's not what I mean, but in the end also the respect and the job and whatever you got was everything would be 2x somewhere else. And I orally agree on that offer. I even offered to freelance for free until I'm out of my notice period. And what comes out on that moment, I get access to because I was hired as an HR exec, and I get access to all the data, and I see I'm like the lowest. And it was not an ego thing, but it was just a way of, look, you hired me based on a lie. And that was like a thing where that was eye-opening. And then I was like, okay, since then every time I cross-checked my offers, I have 3 friends who we 3 always share things which happening. Let it be signing a new flat in Berlin. Should I do this? We take those decisions together. We sort of have a really nice relationship. And I didn't have these people back then. It was mainly like taking these wrong decisions and realizing and reflecting. I think reflecting and reanalyzing the decisions you take brought me somehow to the ability to now take different decisions, as well as somehow also starting my career, I had 2 ambitions. So one was, my parents are self-employed. I want to be an entrepreneur. So if I want to be an entrepreneur, that was the hypothesis I had. I have to not be able to perfectly do everything, because businesses are too complex. You can't be a genius in marketing while being a genius in finance and being a great tech person. If you find this person, let me know. But on the other hand, I think one quality I always try to train is to, on a high but also somewhere on a low level, understand things, not be able to do them perfectly, which sometimes can also get intimidating for people who work in your teams and are like, oh, I would never have expected Aniket understands this thing in marketing so well, because I always thought he's an HR person. And this is like something, for example, also in your leadership style allows you to like really be an inspiring person. So my number 1 ambition was to learn as many things and jump through as many departments I can, to absorb everything I can. And secondly was for me to really, how do I say, become a best of every manager I work with, or also the managers of my managers. So I was super egoistic. I really had a notebook where I wrote down this all hands. I was inspired by the CEO, who didn't even know my name, but no matter how he pitched the outlook for Q3, because he did X, Y, Z. And I wrote that down. And also I wrote down things which I didn't like, which I didn't want to do. And mine sounds super egoistic, but I then really had this book. And then I was like, okay, every, once a quarter or once a half a year, I went into this book and I was like, okay, what actions do I take out of this? And that's a different type of pain than doing wrong decisions. But in the end, you go to the environments, you force yourself to understand how things go well and don't go well without wasting your own money, your own time, your own company, because I didn't have one at this time. But in the end, I think that's the way how I did it.
I love that you actually kept the book for that, because I've never actually kept a physical book, but I always had that in my mind where I would talk to a boss and be like, ooh, I would never want to be like you when I have a team. And then I have other instances where I see things, I'm like, oh, that's a quality that I really admire. And I remember talking to a friend of mine who's a lot younger than me, and she was just getting out of uni. Oh, I don't know what to do next. I'm like, try everything, rotate through it all, see what you like, see what you don't like. But then in the process, also look at the people and think, okay, do I want to be like that or not? And in that, you'll inevitably figure out where you want to go in the way. It's interesting that you went through that experience, because what came up to my mind when you talk about now having kind of friends that you make those decisions with, it reminds me a lot of how some people tend to have grown up in a bit more of a privileged environment where they have the parents that they can go back to and they ask these kind of things. And we don't really have that. And so being able to create a group of people that you can turn to and say, I've got this offer. Does that look fair? Is this making sense? Is so important, especially when you're really on the up and up and trying to get somewhere in your career, but you just didn't grow up with people who could potentially give you that advice is incredibly critical.
I think it comes also with, I'm so blessed that for example, as we said, like when I came to Berlin, I didn't know anything about corporate things. So I always tried to be Aniket, like authentic and stuff. And I always got humorous way. Hate it because like I was okay in networking because I call myself an introverted extrovert. People think I'm extroverted. I'm actually super overthinking and unconfident. I don't know if I should say this here, but maybe people will.
That's relatable. No stress.
But that somehow led me to way more meaningful connections because people realize this guy is not just pitching his business or being kind to me because he wants to have my business. I just came from a meetup, for example, this Wednesday, and I realized my mind just thinking when people talk about their story, really being inspired by that. But on the second level, I really think, okay, Janine is now saying she wants to build, I don't know, a house. Which craftsman do I know? Which could help her. That was the way how this works in your mind, like in the back end. That was like how my mind thought. And you start like thinking, hey, by the way, there's this person, like we're just standing there. She's definitely one you want to talk to. Hey, thanks for the tip. And that gives me so much energy. And also to the circle I have with my friends, we are super diverse people. So this diversity allows me to put a spotlight from different angles to certain situations you have and then allow you to take those decisions. But that's nothing, I'm very honest with you, nothing like which happened over 6 weeks. So it was like I think I'm in my 5th year in Berlin, and I think that's like now the situation where you don't have to worry about those things. And I'm super appreciative about it.
Yeah, it takes time to nurture these relationships, and they don't happen overnight. And I also say, I think developing friendships anywhere, it always takes time, especially when you want to get to a deeper level of friendship.
Definitely.
But I like that you bring up this point of how diverse the group of friends that you have are, because I oftentimes get the impression sometimes when I talk to people from an underrepresented background that they're like, oh, I can't relate to them. They go skiing in the Alps and I've never gone skiing, or oh, they're so privileged and I'm not. And then they get a little bit of animosity or a lack of interest in wanting to hang out. And I think sometimes we have to also be open-minded to the other people that maybe seem more privileged, because it's being able to learn from each other. They've got a different experience that maybe you don't have that actually you could both benefit from as well. So I think that's critical.
Yeah, I think also just a quick one on that. I think it's also a thing, super unsatisfying answer, I know, but it's also somewhere fake it till you make it. I don't mean that take your credit card and go to a fancy Berlin restaurant and spend 70 euro on a schnitzel. Please don't do that.
Don't do it.
But what I mean is, if you want to have the network these people have, if you want to have the net worth these people have, or whatever area you admire them to have, you cannot distance yourself from them. And it's also, to be fairly honest, why wouldn't you talk to someone who has built a road 500 times or in 20 generations they're doing it? Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you talk to that person and be, I'm sorry to say, ignorant? And I was like that as well. I'm not like, I was like that maybe 7-8 years ago. I was similar like that. And would say, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to prove them wrong. And it is no one who cares about you in that sense. I'm sorry, it sounds a bit harsh.
No, but it's true.
No one who cares about you in that sense. And you just, in the end, learn from them. And if you learn 2 good things and 5 bad things, you still learned, in the end, 7 great things for you.
Exactly. You learn 5 things you will not do and 2 that you'll take with you.
Exactly. So there's some are 6, 7. No, sorry. Yeah. Oh my God. We have to cut this off. No, all right. I'm not good in math, as you know.
Worries.
But yeah, but that's the thing I really had to think about when you said that.
That is so relatable to me, because I always said when I first moved to Germany, I have to say I'm that person who is so arrogant about, I don't want to network with people. Why should I hang out with those people? They're just going to have their nose highs and all of these things. And with time, I had to start being more open-minded. But I also think it was, when I really reflect on it at a core, what my problem was, I lacked confidence.
Yeah.
I felt insignificant. I felt like I did not measure up to those other people, which is why I did not want to go talk to them. I felt like they would talk down to me. And I did not have the confidence at the time that even if the person was arrogant towards me, to just say, okay, that's just how they are and it is what it is. And it took, I'm 27 now, right? It's taken, moving to Germany at 18, it's taken about 8-9 years to get to that point where I was like, you're the problem, Janine. It's not them. You'll meet crappy people from everywhere and you'll meet great people from everywhere. So just put yourself in the places, because if they're where you want to be, you need to go talk to them. You need to go figure out how the hell they
right.
did it. But it was a harsh reality because I couldn't accept that it was a me problem.
I can relate so hard on that. Actually, I can really relate so hard on that. But now I'm at a point, I also don't spend so much time in Berlin anymore, spending more time with the family. I try to avoid Berlin Mitte. It's super unpopular opinion, but
it's very common opinion. I hear that a lot.
Yeah, I know. I had a phase, probably 2022, 2020, where I went to every VC party. I had a lot of FOMO. I thought if I stay at home for a weekend, I will lose contact to everyone. I lost contact to a lot of people because 2023 was a year which was, I think, a tough one for me. I stepped back and didn't do so much networking. But what I realized was these connections with the state, are so much stronger than I thought and got so much better. B, I went randomly to such a party in March and everyone was still like, long time no see, but I know who you are. You don't, of course, you are not best buddies with them, but you can warm it up. And in the end, it's not black or white. The truth is always gray. I don't know if this is a quote, but and I think it's like a confidence thing, but I love to slap back with that. If someone is like that, my answer is 10 times the kindness. I love to be so kind that people feel so insanely unwell.
Yeah, it makes them uncomfortable. Right? They're like, why are they
this is
so
exactly
nice to me?
my answer. So I experience this on a weekly basis. And what I always then can say is like, why? I was so kind. And in the end, this gives me more mental peace than worrying about that. But as you said, it took me also probably years to get this detachment to these validations and arrogance or whatever you frame it in.
Yeah, of course. And like you said, from one overthinker to another overthinker, I know I'll be in those situations and afterwards I'm like, oh, did you have to make that comment? Did you have to make that joke? Maybe if you were just a little bit more relaxed.
Yeah.
And it's normal. But only way it gets better is the more you put yourself into those situations. You get more confident. You are able to carry yourself better. You realize that little comment that you made, nobody thought about it.
Yeah.
They'll still be happy to see you the next time you're there. So.
Actually, that was even authentic. And that was a good thing they noticed about you. And you question yourself, that was wrong. But I can fully get it.
Yeah, for sure. And bringing it back to your journey, you didn't right off the bat kick off into entrepreneurship right away. So do you want to just unpack a little bit of how your journey and how you hop from place to place until eventually jumping to entrepreneurship? Because it was your goal, inevitably.
Yeah. I mentioned it a bit earlier. So I knew pretty quickly that the infrastructure I had at this time, I think it was like I was probably 12, 13 years old. I think at this time I was already like always a tough child. But I realized that the surroundings I have are built for being self-employed, and I will always be working and never be building anything sustainably. Because if a business is linked to your labor, that's not a business. That's more of being self-employed. The approach then was I actually started in media because that was the thing I followed my parents from, because they were super proud. It was the first job my parents were proud of. I worked for a radio station back in my hometown for I think 2.5, 3 years, and next to school every second day I went there as a super young guy. First, I from law perspective, I was also just I think allowed to do 5 hours a week. So everything else I did without having them know it. So I borrowed like a microphone, a recording system, and I walked through to the city center of Essen and asked questions. What do you think about Essen's developments? And people were like answering, I hate the city. And I'm like, oh shit, I cannot play this on the radio. And then one day the head of the station calls my parents and says, your son is doing a lot of things. And my mother was like, shit, like I got really trouble. And I ended up leading this editorial team in the end, but still like they were super unhappy with it because they're like, this guy is 15, like how is he gonna lead us? And I was like, let me do it, and if we fail, we fail. And that was exactly how I introduced myself in the first meeting.
I love that.
But then I realized, as said, I never had like understanding of financials, so I did controlling for a steel company in my hometown. Went to Italy with them. Then I realized marketing is a thing and sales I never really knew I could do. So I did sales for a couple of startups, which you do typical B2C sales. You stand on festivals, and I actually started off with a farmer's hat and a apron and with HelloFresh on it, and selling HelloFresh boxes. If you need 5 reasons to buy a HelloFresh box, I probably still can say them. And this is how it all started. And then I realized, okay, I think I never felt ready, but I realized that the responsibility I had was so overwhelming that at work I tried to be as straight and support, hey, I can do it, whatever you say, and be a good manager. I was never like this, you just do it like that and shut up. Like, I was not this type of manager, but I always was super supportive. But still I realized, okay, like, people from outside told me this. Like, my older brother told me, man, like, he visited me one day in the warehouse at Lime, and he goes, man, like, and you managed this all? And I was like, yeah. I was like, but any other question, man? You know, and it was like, I didn't notice it. He's like, man, wait for a minute. Like, what are you doing here? And I was always a heads down guy. And then I realized, okay, this could now be a thing. And back then, as you already mentioned in the intro, I had the opportunity to found something with my childhood friends. We did a shitty business, to be fairly honest. Like, we had no idea of tech. So the tech was like a call center in India. And the back end, that was the only back end. So it was always, let me circle back, our system is down. That was always the answer, because we had no system. The system was in Excel. And you had to call like the supplier. It was like a logistics concierge service. So in the end, it was like just a call center. We didn't make big money out of it. Just as a spoiler, it was like just like the biggest project we did back then. How old were we? I think it was 2016, I think. Yeah, it was 2016. And then I realized, okay, now rotating through all these areas, there's one thing missing. It's HR. So back then, it sounds super like we are speaking about 1990.
But this sounds very strategic, really. Just to interrupt you, were you mentally thinking, okay, I've got the sales, I've done the...
No, it was not, I've got that, I'm a master, but I understood, sort of,
okay,
you know, like on a high level. Like, if you say CAC or customer acquisition cost, I can understand a little bit more, as if I would straight up did a HR degree, hiring experience, you know what I mean? So in the end...
But you were in your mind thinking, okay, I've got a little bit of experience here. I've got a little bit of experience. This thing is missing. Let me try that next. Yeah. That's how you're doing it.
And that was a future bet. That was like the biggest, not the biggest, not the biggest, but like more of a strategic decision as a pivot in career I did. Because I thought, what is the thing if you can sell a product, I think, and are fine with slightly with tech and finance, you can somehow decrease, I don't say you have high odds to build a successful business, but you decrease the odds to build an unsuccessful business. Maybe you get the difference. And that was what I thought. But then I thought, okay, there must be skills which you need. And I was super self-critical. I was like, I'm still an idiot. I zero confidence back at this time. And I was like, okay, one thing which makes or breaks a company is the right people. Okay, how do people hire people? And then I, did research and back. And then I realized, okay, let's try this. So I call my former manager at HelloFresh and I say, look, I told you always I want to go to Berlin. I ended my startup. It went, and I want to go to Berlin. And she's like, yeah, okay, but which experience do you have? I was like, you know me. She's like, yeah, I know your attitude, but no one is going to hire you. She's like, look, if you want to do HR, you need to have a degree, you have to bachelor's, blah, blah. I was like, please find a way. We have to find a way. And I bombarded. I'm very honest with you. I sent probably, I'm not lying, like 1,000 CVs. My CV, but 1,000 applications. Every company. I just said, hey, I'm a young guy, ambitious. I will even work for free, but just give me a job in HR. No one answered. Like some people answered, but most of them were like, no. Let's talk in 5 years. That like my favorite message.
Let's talk in 5 years.
Yeah.
5 years, I don't want to work here. Actually, that's a good point, actually. I thought about the business now. Yeah, I probably would not work there anymore. And then I realized, okay, HR back then was seen as an administrative function. Working student, somehow I was going to do it, do the payroll and stuff. And I was super egoistic, went to talent acquisition because I thought that might be more the future bet for me. And it turned out pretty well because then I got opportunities to stay within HR and could combine my commercial understanding with the HR component. So being having empathy, being a people-centric person, being super analytical and reading people, and doing right hiring decisions. And that was like somehow also USP, which I had the feeling was appreciated in Berlin, like when I talked to startups, and allowed me then to also learn about labor law and stuff. And then I expanded my horizon to broader people, as I, for example, did now with my last role, where I was leading like 4 countries in a sense of like with the entities. And it gave me like then the understanding of, again, being in a shirt which is too big for you. I still think about that. But on the other hand, also allowed me to now
when I work with founders which are friends or I advise businesses to see repetitive problems, which I am very sure I would have done as well if I would not have spent 5 years in HR. So that turned out to be then the path to, now like being at the point where you are appreciated by startups.
I think that's super admirable, your experience, because on one hand, you were strategically thinking, okay, I understand this area, I understand that area, I understand this one, there's a hole here, let me see if I can figure it out. And I also like that you point out how audacious you were. You were like, I'm going to bombard everybody with a message until it gets done, because I think oftentimes it can feel like, okay, I got rejected once or so many times, do I keep trying? It's like, yes. Keep trying, keep going. If that's what you really want to do, someone will give you the opportunity. You're going to have to be really annoying, but someone will give you the opportunity. And then the other side is, like you said, wearing a t-shirt that was a bit too big for you. I think it's this other side of putting yourself into these circumstances where probably way above your head, where maybe it was an experience level far beyond you, but you were like, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to try it and I'm going to see what I can do in the situation. And that's really admirable from your experience. So super cool. And I hope other people can find it inspiring, because as I was listening to you talk about it, I was like, wow, this is super cool.
Maybe looking back sounds always cooler than it is doing it. But in the end, I'm fortunate enough I still actually think I was just lucky. Yeah. And in the end, you get in touch with the right people and somehow your paths cross and you get supported by people, and that leads you then to that path instead of doing that. But I think I would not recommend someone spending 5 years and doing 20 areas, but maybe try to take a step and ask yourself, why am I taking this step, and what would I envision at the step after that? You don't need to think about step 100 today, but think about 1, 2, 3, or why you are taking this step 1 and which step 2 would you envision yourself being prepared by step 1. So it's in the end that what somehow led me to going this path, and as well as also to be fairly transparent, it was like how I got my first job in Berlin. I literally told them, give me an internship salary. If you don't trust me, give me, what's the lowest you can go? Minimum wage. All right, give me. And I worked on minimum wage for half a year. And after 3 months, they said, man, you are not an intern. And I was like, I don't care. I agreed on that. I signed this contract. I'm going to fulfill it. So you have budgeted an intern salary. You hadn't budgeted for an intern. I'm going to work as an intern, even though maybe I'm not the typical intern. I don't care. And the offer after that was then substantially better. But in the end, I didn't care. I was like, I'm here for learnings. And I'm back then, how old was I? 18. And I think in the end, I think it's like also being resilient. I never think that a good day means 10 good days. I always, I think, push on that, and that's what I think I appreciate a lot. That's something my mother always said. Never think like one good day means 10 good days. Always think maybe there could be a cloudy day. A
couple rainy days
exactly,
in between. Yeah. To also bring it now to where we are today. So I know you're in the process of building. Are we allowed to talk about that? Do you want to share a little bit of what you're trying to build now? And what's the
I can paraphrase it a little bit. We will launch it soon. So the idea is to build a solution which allows you to not have a conflict between quality and quantity while hiring, as well as still having a focus on hiring diverse teams, because I think we are all influenced by bias we have inside ourselves. I would call maybe myself being pretty aware about several patterns you fall back into, but still I catch myself and I'm like, no, review it again, and still I'm not good at it at all, but I think I am hyper self-critical on this, and that's exactly the solution we are building. And I think it's like a thing which makes me insanely passionate, because I can add my passion of HR to this. I can drive my, I would say, I don't know if I hate this term, but I recently heard it, like being an advocate for diversity. I'm a nobody, so I don't want to be like an ambassador.
About yourself?
No, but I don't want to be an ambassador or something. I have a really rough relationship to PR and stuff, so I always think, no, I'm not the right one to call someone else. So that's my first podcast. That's why I also thought a lot about it. But in the end, I think, it allows me to add the passions, and let's see where it goes. I think right now, exciting times.
Yeah, it is super exciting. And I love that you're building that, because we also talked about this separately previously, but for a while we were always hearing in the scene, especially over the last 5 years prior to now, everything was DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Everyone was talking about it. But when we look at the stats and we're looking at what's going on today, we're seeing headlines across the board of major organizations and a lot of tech companies pulling out on their DEI pledges. And a lot of that comes out to the fact that they did not have measurable data. They did not have structures in place to actually make this a long-term commitment, and they didn't get involvement from key stakeholders from higher up, right? So I love that you're building a solution like this that is going to support with the hiring process, especially when I know the tech scene and the startup scene can be very biased.
Yeah, you are not from this business school, you're out.
Yeah, exactly. And I know this, right? I appreciate that you're building a solution that's within the space because it's needed. It's incredibly needed. And let's be honest, in Germany, a lot of CVs still require you to have a photo on it. Like,
I don't do it. Like, actually, I must admit, I'm maybe privileged because I don't do like a typical, like, I apply with LinkedIn, or if I'm in a process, I don't know, for example, with a headhunter or so, they share your LinkedIn. But I think in the end, you brought up a point which I am hypersensitive about, which is like the trends we see, like the journey we went, which was somehow really good. We did a great job over, let's say, the last 5 years, you said. But now where it's going, I'm also really worried about certain things, like the mindset in front of migration right now, like looking at our economy, but also at our society. But also one thing I keep myself and all my friends who have similar backgrounds accountable on, or I always share, is like, guys, we have to keep ourselves accountable on opening those doors for others, which like someone else opened a door for us as well. Like one of my bold hires, like one thing, I hate this term, but where no one saw this, everyone was like, why are you doing this? You could go for exactly this person, I don't know, bachelor at Frankfurt School, master in St. Gallen, and then half a year at McKinsey or whatever, or a year at McKinsey, and hire him or her as a chief of staff. And I took a person which literally studied in Berlin, like not disrespecting her, by the way, she's like the best hire I ever did. And she struggled a lot, and I spent probably more time on coaching and growing her than actually having output of her. It took 3 months until she was on a level like on that person. And everyone, like in the first 6 months, like on a weekly basis, I heard out of the team, out of the company, when are we firing her?
Wow.
And not because like of that, but no one understood it takes so much longer, blah blah. And I know, but that was like, I swear to myself that I will always build institutions and instruments to open those doors. And I'm super fortunate that my friends are not 100%, they're 1,000% in line with this vision. Let it be being supportive to other people who seek advice. It's not that I have the perfect advice and I know everything well. It's also sometimes connecting someone to someone who has a certain struggle, or as said, building instruments. Yeah, I keep myself, for example, accountable on, I don't know, I reflect a lot about it. Did I add any value this month, this year, this week? But also, I don't know, in a way of seeing someone struggle, and you sometimes, very often, as we also realized in the intro, feel there are people being similar with those struggles, or people I look up to. Yeah. Like just a quick one, I met one of the co-founders of Two Hearts, and she, like Gülscha, and she shared a lot about her story, and the things she spoke about were literally struggles I also had. And the thing I asked myself was, oh hell, like she's a big fish, like these big fishes have also these struggles. I have to say, I thought these are children's problems, and I'm a child. And I just said this to her, like maybe also a weird thing to say, and
authenticity.
The way she, like, for example, she opened so many doors. I'm hyper appreciative to this woman, and also the whole community. And those are now instruments which people built from our backgrounds, which suffered, and we will have this more and more, hopefully, but we have to keep each other accountable on doing this. It will not end with a nice keynote. It will not end with some, I'm sorry, LinkedIn posts and stuff like that. It will probably be by having each other being accountable, and accountability doesn't need to be you build an NGO and feed 5 million people and cure world hunger. You will probably not be able to do this. I hope you will, but it's unlikely that we both will be able to do it. But in the end, like having this accountability in front of your friends, in front of your peers, and I think it's everyone's responsibility, and also people who are not from these backgrounds. But I think it's easier to start working, and we are fortunate that the first and a lot of people, or a little bit more people, maybe start off with that, from our backgrounds are in these positions, are founders, are HR executives, and it can also be you just being a hiring manager. You are now also in a position of power, and have the opportunity to let someone in or guide someone, look through his or her CV. It takes 5 minutes. I don't know, I review probably 10 CVs a week, and I say, hey, I don't have a job for you, but I would change this and that, don't get me wrong.
Exactly.
And they're
just
like, hey, why would I take you wrong? I really appreciate it. I just don't get a rejection. I just get told to, I don't know, change the formatting or highlight my education a little bit more. And these are like the things. And in the end, I think that's our responsibility. And that's something I definitely want to fight more on, because I see this whole debate moving more to a PR and Vogue thing instead of an actionable thing. And people talking about it who add literally zero value to it or use this as a surfboard and surf on the wave of hype. And I'm like, this is adding no value. So I'm hypercritical on myself to how can I improve and support this. But I'm glad that, I don't know, people like Maria connect us both and we can fight for it. And yeah, that's definitely something. I'm sorry, I get slightly emotional on this, but I get very angry if I see like how it develops and we actually, it will end, like last sentence from my side on this topic, not on this topic, but to end the sadness is like it will end through actions and not through LinkedIn posts and PR and I don't know, my shitty face in a newspaper.
I get you. I love how passionate you are about this, because I'm also so passionate about it. I mean, I literally just did a TEDx talk on this last Friday because I'm just so, and I was calling it out because I'm like, here's the problems. Like, we keep doing this diversity washing, but when we look at the headlines, people are pulling back. And what I really appreciate about what you said is it's in all of our hands, and we actually all have the power to actually make a difference. And it doesn't mean you have to do something big. You don't have to start an NGO. You don't have to start a community, but it's something as simple as, and I remember I heard this from Nora Bevy, and she was saying, it's as simple as realizing that you will have a +1 to most things that you go to. You can always bring a +1. And it's as simple as just saying, hey, would you like to come with me? And that in and of itself is a door opener for someone who maybe would not have had access to that. And being just cognizant of, okay, who could I bring along with this? Or like what you said, someone brought up an idea of what they wanted to do, and you're like, oh, I can connect you with this person. They'll probably be able to help you with that. And that's it. That's all you have to do. And in and of itself, the amount of impact that you can drive and create by just thinking a little bit outside of yourself for a moment and just realizing, I can take someone else with me on this journey, or I can help in this way. It's already enough. Or it's as simple as just reposting your friend's post.
Exactly, liking it, commenting it. And it's not about, you said it really well, because I have an actual example on that. Like, let's say you want to have land a job at McKinsey. It sounds a bit weird, this example, but we have to make it tangible to us that if you want to land a job at McKinsey, we both have a similar background, or we have the background we have. It's not the intro to a partner which grants you the job via WhatsApp because I have been playing golf with him for 50 years. That's not, because we try to be like that. Yeah, we know other people who can do this, so we measure ourselves with that. The first step could be knowing someone who struggled with the recruitment process at McKinsey, for example, and made it. And that's, for example, I have a real life example of a friend who I connected with someone who went through the recruitment process and got hired. And that was, in the end, a bigger help than, of course, talking to a partner would have been also a huge help, but I couldn't provide that. So in the end, you maybe get what I mean. It's in the end like a smaller action which can influence and make someone's day, week, life, or maybe even year.
There you have it, folks. You don't have to be a big fish to make a difference. The smallest actions can create waves. Aniket, you're remarkable. Thank you for sharing your story, your insights, and advice. And honestly, in just 23 years, you've already accomplished so much. I can't wait to see what life has in store for you next. And to all of you listening, thank you for tuning in. And speaking of small actions, please remember to follow On the Up and Up on your favorite podcast streaming and social media channels. And with that being said, onwards and upwards, y'all, and I'll speak to you soon.